Throughout Formula One history, danger has always been part and parcel of a competition. Drivers know the risks when they strap themselves into a rocket ship on wheels and try to go faster than the other 20 to 30 people who have the same ambitions as them. Sometimes things go wrong though, and crashing out of a race is something even the most talented individuals will do a few times in their career. During the early years of Grand Prix racing through to about the mid-1970s, death was incredibly commonplace. The movie Rush coined the idea that two F1 drivers died every single season, and despite this, they were still willing to take the risk. The list of fatalities at Formula One weekends currently sits at 32, averaging at nearly 1 every 2 years. However, that figure is incredibly diluted due to 2 stints between 1994 to 2015 and 2016 to present, where no drivers passed away due to accidents at all. If we took the death statistics from between 1950 to after the season that claimed the lives of Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna, there was a 2/3 chance that at least one fatality would occur in any given season. That doesn't include drivers who died outside of F1, with a notable example being Jim Clark, who died driving an F2 car at Hockenheim in 1968. A total of 154 drivers who competed in a round of the Formula One World Championship died from non-natural causes, although this figure also includes instances such as helicopter and road accidents. This accounts for a staggering 17% of all F1 drivers in history, including those who competed in the Indy 500 from 1950 to 1960 when it was part of the World Championship calendar. However, despite the doom and gloom of these numbers, only one driver has died in a Formula One race in the last 30 years, and that is Jules Bianchi, who crashed at the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, passing away 9 months later in mid-2015. It's completely normal for us to speculate the prospects of those who never got to show their full driving potential, from established champions such as Alberto Ascari and the aforementioned Clark and Ayrton Senna, to young upstarts like Stuart Lewis-Evans, Tom Pryce or Stefan Beloff, who only achieved a handful of good results before having their chances snatched away in the most brutal fashion. Naturally, due to the fact that he's the most recent death in a sport that's only going to keep growing in popularity with newer fans learning about the history, and the fact he was a young Ferrari Academy driver, Jules Bianchi is one of those who people nowadays say was a future great. However, I disagree with this idea. With the utmost respect towards a fallen competitor, I aim to fairly analyse and explain why I think Jules Bianchi is overrated and wasn't the driver people think he was.
Manuel Fangio is in the lead on the last lap of the German Grand Prix.
Jim Clark drives the Formula One Motorsport to victory on the racetracks of the world.
And look at that! Colossally, that's Mansell! That is Nigel Mansell! Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately! This is amazing! Senna goes off at the first corner!
And I've got to stop, because I've got a lump in my throat.
Jules Bianchi was born in Nice in France on the 3rd of August 1989. Racing was in his blood as he was the grandnephew of one-time F1 podium finisher Lucien Bianchi, and his granddad Mauro also competed in high-level GT and non-championship Formula One races during the 1960s. He began karting at the remarkably young age of 3 and was definitely helped in his early years by the fact his dad owned a track that he could drive on. He made his car racing debut in 2007, aged 18, driving in French Formula Renault 2.0, and he got 2nd and 3rd places in the first 2 rounds at Nogaro, won back-to-back at Lebanon, and took 3 more victories in Dijon, Magny-Cours and Catalonia respectively. His 5 triumphs and 11 podiums from 13 races won him the championship, although there weren't many well-known talented drivers in the field, as I only recognised future F1 prospects Charles Pic and Alexander Sims out of everyone. Nonetheless, it was Bianchi's first year in cars and he was quick, also competing in 6 rounds of the Eurocup Formula Renault 2.0 series, where he got 1 pole and a fastest lap in a much stronger field. He moved up to European F3 in 2008, taking late-season victories at the Le Mans Bugatti circuit and Hockenheim. Despite this, he had nearly half the points of runaway champion Nico Hülkenberg and was also behind Eduardo Mortara in another particularly weak field. He finished 9th in the Macau Grand Prix and won the Masters of F3 race at Zolder, beating Hülkenberg by 5 seconds. He stayed in the 3rd tier of Continental Open Wheel competition for 2009 and wiped the floor with younger rookie teammates Valtteri Bottas and Esteban Gutierrez to win the title, winning at the Euro Lausitz-Ring, the Norris Ring, taking a double in Zandvoort, and further successes in Oschersleben, the Nürburgring Grand Prix Strecke, Catalonia and Hockenheim, and was well clear of runner-up Christian Viatuaris. Jules was 10th in Macau and did a few rounds of the British Championship too, and was also a contender for Felipe Massa's F1 seat while the Brazilian's replacement Luca Badoer was flailing in obscurity. At the end of 2009, following an F1 test in December, he became the first recruit of the Ferrari Driver Academy and was signed onto a long-term deal. He moved up for 2010 and competed in the GP2 Asia Series as a prelude to his campaign in the second tier, scoring 1 podium in the 6 races he did. A pole position at the season opener in Catalonia yielded no fruit in either the sprint or the feature race, but he scored an impressive 4th, then 3rd in Monaco. He struggled in Istanbul, got 2nd place in the Valencia feature, then did the same thing from pole in Silverstone, which set off a 4-race points streak. However, a crash on the opening lap of the main event in Hungary, with hope in tongue, saw Bianchi fracture a vertebrae, although he recovered to not miss any races. Another pointless weekend in Spa was followed by another pole in Monza, 2nd in the feature race and 4th in the sprint. Despite another lacklustre weekend in Abu Dhabi, he ended the season 3rd in the standings, even with no wins, only 4 podiums, and scoring points in less than half of the races. The pair who finished above Jules, Pastor Maldonado and Sergio Perez, moved up to F1 with Williams and Sauber respectively, which should have paved the way for Bianchi to take it in 2011 in their absence, if you look purely at the raw rankings. If you look at the points tallies themselves though, he was only 1 point clear of future HRT reject Danny Kloss, and only 3 and 4 ahead of Sam Bird and Oliver Turvey. The Frenchman was runners-up to Romain Grosjean in the shortened Asia Winter Series, which actually had to host a round in Imola due to civil unrest in Bahrain cancelling the 2 events planned there. Then in the main championship, he got 3rd in the opening feature race in Istanbul, but failed to score points in the sprint. 7th in the Catalonia feature was the last points finish he had until 6 races later in Silverstone, where he took pole and the win. He proceeded to score in all of the remaining 9 rounds, getting 2nd in the Nürburgring sprint, and the same result in both Spa races, along with 3rd in the last sprint of the year in Monza. This effort got him 3rd in the championship, behind runaway champion Grosjean and Luca Filippi in 2nd. During 2011, he had also replaced Marc Genet and Giancarlo Fisichella as the Ferrari test and reserve drivers, and drove for them in the Young Drivers Test at the end of the season. After he was unable to win GP2, for 2012 he moved over to Formula Renault 3.5 and became Force India's reserve driver in F1, competing in 9 FP1 outings. He failed to score at all in the season opener in Aragon, then got 2nd place in both Monaco and the first of 2 races in Spa, getting 17th in the other. A win from pole with fastest lap came at the first Nürburgring race before he got 12th in the second. 2nd and 7th in Moscow came before a win and 3rd place in Silverstone, another 3rd and a 9th at the Hungaroring, 4th and a win in Paul Ricard, and a lacklustre 7th in Catalonia. He finished runners-up in the standings, 4 points behind rookie Robin Freins, but it was another weak field. Only 3 full-time drivers ever made it to F1, and while he beat a young Kevin Magnussen, the Dane was making a step up from F3, meanwhile Bianchi had had 2 years' experience at a similar level to the one Formula Renault was. Alex Rossi and Will Stevens also competed, but they were never that good in F1. The rest of the field were mostly drivers who would eventually end up in Formula E. The likes of Freins, Sam Bird, Antonio Felix da Costa and Daniel Abt weren't necessarily bad competition, but surely if Jules was this generational talent, future champion everyone says he was, he could beat Robin Freins, who had just been promoted from 2-litre formulas. For 2013, after showing inconsistent potential in Junior Series, and not being able to beat the likes of Pastor Maldonado, Sergio Perez, Romain Grosjean and Robin Freins, he got a chance when less than 3 weeks before the first round of the Formula 1 season, Brazilian driver Lucas Razia had his contract with the Marussia team terminated due to a lack of sponsorship money. Bianchi was recruited last minute to replace him, and he would be partnering Max Chilton, who had just finished 4th in GP2 behind Davide Valsecchi, Razia and Esteban Gutierrez. Despite the short notice, Bianchi turned up and qualified the highest out of the Marussia and Caterham drivers, 8 tenths clear of Chilton, then finished a lap ahead of his teammate in 15th on race day. It was a solid debut, and one that kind of set the tone for what was to come in the rest of the season. He put 1.2 seconds on Chilton in Sepang quali, and was an impressive 13th on Sunday, albeit he didn't finish ahead of any non-backmarker team cars. It was 8 tenths to Chilton in China, and another 15th. Then 19th in Bahrain, and 18th in Spain was followed by his first F1 retirement in Monaco, when he crashed into the barriers at Saint-Devote on lap 58. He was 17th in Canada and 16th in Silverstone at a track he went at well in Junior Series, also out-qualifying Chilton by 1.7 seconds in the latter. Then at the Nürburgring, Bianchi had an engine failure coming up to the Vidal chicane on lap 21, but rather peculiarly, his car rolled back down the hill, going across the live track before being stopped by an advertising board. A very strange retirement indeed. He finished no higher than 16th in the next 5 rounds in Hungary, Spa, Monza, Singapore and Korea, and was embarrassingly out-qualified by Chilton in Suzuka by 6 tenths, before crashing out on lap 1 of Guido van der Garde. He was beaten in India by his British teammate for only the second race that year, then was 20th in Abu Dhabi, 18th in Kota and 17th at the last race in Brazil. Bianchi finished the highest of the Marussia and Caterham drivers in the standings thanks to his 13th place in Malaysia, but had been unable to show his potential in bad machinery. He and Chilton got through to Q2 only once in Spa, and despite Max finishing every race in his rookie season, Jules was clearly much faster in both qualifying and race trim. Both retained their seats for 2014, heading into the turbo hybrid era, and amazingly at the first round in Melbourne, Bianchi was out-qualified by his teammate by half a second. Then he wasn't classified 8 laps down, although the reason for which isn't documented nor was shown on the live TV broadcast. He asserted his dominance over Chilton in wet qualifying in Sepang by 1.6 seconds, but had brake problems on lap 8. Then Chilton finished ahead of him in Bahrain in 13th, while Bianchi was 17th, before he took another 17th in China. Max pulled 6 tenths on Jules in Spain qualifying before the Frenchman finished ahead in 18th in the race. Then came the Monaco Grand Prix. Bianchi qualified 19th, but had a 5-place grid penalty for a gearbox change, although this only dropped him to 21st place as Marcus Ericsson started from the pit lane. He was up to 16th by lap 2, which became 15th when Sebastian Vettel retired with mechanical problems. Another position came from similar circumstances, overcoming Danny Kvyat on lap 10. Then on lap 19, Bianchi was given a 5-second time penalty for being in the wrong position on the grid, thanks to Pastor Maldonado having fuel pump failure before the race started, putting everyone behind him out of position. Things stayed the same until lap 24 when Adrian Sutil crashed on the approach to the Nouvelle chicane, and Jules pitted in the ensuing safety car with everyone else, also serving his penalty. Then on lap 36, Kimi Raikkonen overtook Kamui Kobayashi into Raskas, and at the last minute, Bianchi decided to also try and squeeze through. He put his car halfway alongside at the apex, but barged the Caterham out the way, hitting it 3 separate times through the corner, damaging Kobayashi's car in each instance as he overtook. This should have been a penalty, as Jules gave another driver considerable damage, and the Japanese driver was on course for a fantastic result, but eventually finished 3 laps down due to the aftermath of this incident. Bianchi remained unpenalised, however, and his 13th place became 12th when Jean-Eric Vergne served the drive-through penalty for an unsafe release from the pits on Kevin Magnussen. Bottas had an engine failure ahead of him, then Gutierrez clipped the inside wall at Raskas with his rear tyre on lap 59, which promoted him to 10th. On lap 71, Magnussen and the recovering Raikkonen came together at the hairpin, which put Bianchi into 8th. He stayed in this position right until the end of the race, although he had his penalty from earlier reinstated due to the fact that serving him on the safety car isn't permitted. This dropped him to 9th, but nonetheless he scored the Marussia/Virgin/Manor team their first points in F1. 2 points to be exact. Now this was obviously a great result for a small team and Jules as a driver, but I'm going to put my cynic hat on here. He started 21st and made his way up to 8th, meaning that he gained 13 places from his starting position. Despite that, he only made 2 on-track overtakes. One of those was on his teammate on lap 1, and the other was the murder on Kobayashi. He should have been punished for that move, and Kamui would have probably beaten him had it not happened. Overall, in a chaotic race where only 10 cars made it to the end without incident, he finished 9th. Well done, mate. You beat Marcus Ericsson in a Caterham. I initially drew a comparison to Jenson Button's performance at the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix, where the Brit might have had a great run from first to last, but that wouldn't have even been possible if he didn't get a drive-through for speeding in the pits and him taking a gamble on tyres. He also took out Alonso. Like, yes, it's impressive to go from last to first, but taking 2 drivers out on the way nullifies it somewhat. Another comparison could be made with the 1995 Australian Grand Prix. No one praised Mika Salo or Pedro Lamy for scoring points with backmarker teams in a race that nearly saw the 40 team get into the top 6, nor did they shout about Morbidelli getting a podium in an awful footwork. This is why I don't get the hype about Bianchi. 99% of the people who say he was a future champ weren't even watching F1 at the time because they're TikTok Charles Leclerc loving fangirls and boys who drool over him because they like him. I have a crush on Leclerc too, but it doesn't mean his godfather was as good as he was. He finished 9th in a 10-car race ahead of a bad F1 driver, Marcus Ericsson, in an awful car. I'll end my rant there for now as I complete the rest of the 2014 season results, but it's not over yet. He crashed with Chilton on the opening lap in Montreal, then was 15th in Austria, 14th in Silverstone, 15th in Hockenheim in Hungary, was classified 18th after gearbox failure late on in Spa, finished in the same position in Monza, then was 16th in Singapore. Then came the Japanese Grand Prix. Now, Bianchi's death has been covered on YouTube so much it's a cliche, but essentially what happened was, it was a race held in typical monsoon conditions in Suzuka, and when Adrian Sutil's Sauber went off at Dunlop, a tractor crane was deployed to recover his car. Bianchi went off at the same corner a lap later and hit the tractor at 70 miles an hour, sustaining massive head and brain injuries, eventually dying in hospital 9 months later, aged 25. Under safety protocols at the time, it was completely normal to have recovery vehicles on the outskirts of a live racetrack. Just look at the 2007 European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring where one of the Toro Rossos nearly went into a JCB at turn 1. Martin Brundle always talks about him breaking a marshal's leg by accident at Suzuka in 1994, so it's not like the FIA didn't have warnings. Newer fans blame Charlie Whiting for not deploying the safety car in those conditions, but that wasn't the done thing at the time for having such heavy machinery on track. Whether it was wet enough for an intervention is debatable, because they did stop races like Malaysia in 2012 and Korea in 2010, but not this one. Regardless of what should have happened though, what did happen was that a driver had died in a Formula 1 race for the first time in 21 years, and the first time an active F1 driver died overall since Maria Di Vallota in 2013. Hers and Bianchi's deaths were similar in nature, and it meant that the development of head safety systems was accelerated, with various halo and aeroscreen devices tested in 2016. The halo was brought in for the 2018 season, with many drivers and fans saying that it was ugly and they didn't like it. Now, however, with incidents such as Guan Yu Zhou in Silverstone and Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen in Monza, I don't think anyone is doubting its necessity. It's not even ugly now, as it's had the entire car built around it instead of being plonked on top awkwardly. The device wouldn't have saved Jules' life, as the halo withstands the same force before crippling as the roll cage, and that was decimated by the tractor, but nonetheless, it has prevented several deaths since. Some fans point out how convenient it is that since the introduction of the halo, there has been an increase in accidents where it's been needed, or where seemingly it saved a driver's life, such as Bianchi's godson Charles Leclerc at Spa in 2018, but I think that's just coincidence. Also as a result of Suzuka 2014, since Charlie Whiting died, the likes of Michael Massey and Niels Wittich have been scared to race in adverse conditions, with jokes often quipped about the extreme wet tyres being useless. And although I agree they're trigger happy at times to intervene, I'd much rather that than get a repeat of Bianchi, even if the FIA tried to kill off one of his fellow countrymen in 2022 at the same circuit. Safety precautions have always ticked people off, whether it's modifications to the tracks or cars, but as much as I want to see great racing, I'd much rather falling asleep watching the F1 every weekend than watch someone die every 10 years because the officials are negligent. I think that since Liberty Media took over and F1 has exploded, I'm part of a very small minority of fans who actually saw an F1 driver die. I know we never saw it live, but it still counts. I understand a lot of you guys will have a lot more experience with the morbid side of racing than I do, so maybe you can tell me which driver death hit you the hardest, and why that driver is Jules Villeneuve or Ayrton Senna. Back to Bianchi and the point of this video though, I genuinely don't see why people laud him as a future legend. He beat Chilton, yes, but he wasn't convincing. In 2014, he was out-qualified and out-raced in 1/3 of the events he competed in before his death, against someone we can all agree is in the bottom 5 drivers of the 2010s, as a nondescript pay driver who only lasted 2 seasons. His 9th place in Monaco wasn't that special as I outlined. The story of the backmarker team scoring was, but he only made 2 on-track overtakes, and one of them took out the only other guy who would have threatened his team's prospects. Bianchi is similar to Ayrton Senna in the way that after his death, certain groups of fans acted like he was better than he actually was, and he'd have gone on to do much more. Like with Ayrton, some people have alternate realities where he wins 1994 through 97, which admittedly would be fair as he was far better than the mediocre Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve, but the idea that a 38 to 40-year-old with 7 championships would move to Ferrari and beat a prime Michael Schumacher to me is absurd, and many people, mainly Brazilians, say he's the GOAT, when he wasn't even better than Alain Prost. People always have what I call highlights or compilation syndrome when talking about Senna, where Monaco 1988 qualifying and Donington 1993 are seen as the reason he's the best, when in fact he wasn't always a level above everyone else. Damon Hill nearly won a race by 30 seconds in an Arrows, and I still call him the worst champion of the last 40 years. It's a similar thing with Bianchi because 95% of the idea that he was great stems from Monaco 2014, and it's just frustrating to me. I'd be surprised if he even ended up in a Ferrari or stayed in F1 past 2017, never mind being able to stay around to partner Leclerc. He wasn't a bad driver, that's not what I'm trying to say, but he wasn't the bona fide champion everyone thinks he was. He lost in GP2 to Pastor Maldonado, Sergio Perez, Romain Grosjean and Luca Filippi, and lost the Formula Renault 3.5 title to a future Formula E reject who was a rookie when Jules had about 3 years experience in similar machinery. I know some drivers can be bad in junior formulas and good in F1, but surely generational talents kind of supersede that. Then he doesn't beat Chilton convincingly, not in 2014 anyway, so either Max Chilton was a force to be reckoned with, or Jules Bianchi was no better than an upper midfield driver at best. This video is meant to highlight the bias people show towards dead drivers, not just Bianchi, because for every Ayrton Senna and Jim Clark, there's a Riccardo Paletti or Roland Ratzenberger. The likes of Paletti, Ratzenberger and Jules Bianchi never got a chance to show their full potential, but that doesn't mean they were anything world-beating. I tried to write this piece in a way that was firm and critical, but still respectful because I didn't want to besmirch the name of a guy who can't defend himself. So I hope it didn't come off as insensitive, rude or egregious because that absolutely wasn't my intention. My intention was to highlight his career whilst being grounded in reality. Anyways, with that being said, I think that brings today's video to a close. I hope you enjoyed me detailing the career of Jules Bianchi, and if you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to see more content from me in the future. Big shout out to my Patreon subscribers Andy Lamberts and Eamon Al-Dowdy, and if you'd like to join them in supporting my channel and get videos a day earlier than usual, please subscribe to my Patreon for as little as £1 per month. Follow my Instagram where I post behind the scenes updates, and also take a look at my Twitter or X or whatever you call it, which I've recently started posting on ranting about F1 and stupid Drive to Survive fans' opinions. But without further ado, I'm Nedzo, and I'll see you all later. Bye!